The secondary is really good.
Yeah.
But for some odd reason, when the ball goes deep, let's just say past 15 yards, the guys for some odd reason lose their senses. I don't know what it is. I thought Hancock had a good game. It was good to see Jermaine Matthews out there, but he didn't play that well either.
No. Yeah, and I think a part of the reason why Ohio State started slow to begin is let's give Northwestern a little bit of credit off the top here. They were coming off a bye week. They clearly had a game plan going in to keep the ball away from Ohio State. They wanted to be in control. They wanted to ground and pound and make sure that there was not going to be an opportunity for Ohio State to have a lot of possessions. I mean, first quarter, they only had one offensive possession. And I mean, that's kind of unheard of in today's college football. So I think Northwestern definitely deserves some credit for coming out with that game plan, coming off the bye week. But, you know, in the end, I think the turning point in the game ended up being the botched snap on the punt. When that ball went over his head, at that point, Northwestern knew we're in trouble. Because then Ohio State gets the ball there at the 1, you know, you punch it in there, and then the floodgates kind of opened up.
Exactly.
I thought that's really what needed to kind of have to happen in order for them to really feel loose. I thought Ohio State played uptight a little bit there in the first half, specifically offensively. I'm not sure if it was more of an issue being they may be overlooking Northwestern initially. You know, it was a little bit of a trap game without you coming up this week. But I just didn't think they came out crisp. But, again, we saw the adjustments they made in the second half.
Exactly. And I put a lot of stock into a team. Is when you don't play your best game, what do you still look like? Yes. For Ohio State, I mean, I would count that as maybe a B-plus game out of us, and we won 31-7. Like I said, we did let them drive a little bit on us, but we stopped them. You know, going back to that special teams play. Now, Caden Curry didn't get the tackle on there, but I mean, since last year and going into this year, that kid makes a lot of plays on special teams. If you remember last year, I forgot who they were playing. I think it might have been Iowa, but they tried to run a fake punt and he tackles the guy on it, and then earlier this season gets the block punt, and now in this game he's around the area on a botch snap on a punt. I mean, it's nice to see the younger guys make plays. Also look towards the Jack Sawyer fumble they picked up, and that was just huge for us. That was I think sometimes when your offense sometimes when your offense isn't clicking early, it's nice to from the other two phases of the game to have them step up. And that's what Ohio State did. I think that's the signs of a team that's on their way to being or to looking complete. And that was playing a complete game.
Yeah, and that was one of the issues Ohio State had earlier in the season was the lack of forcing turnovers. You know, especially when they also weren't getting pressure on the quarterback. And that was a big problem. Sawyer's forcing that fumble, I agree, was huge. Stopped Northwestern's momentum on that first drive. If Northwestern goes and scores on the opening drive, I think Ohio State kind of goes back on their heels a little bit. They're like, whoa, we kind of got punched in the mouth. We weren't expecting that. I mean, the crowd, was 70-30 Ohio State fans. So it was a home. Make no mistake about it, it was a home game for Ohio State.
Definitely.
So I think that forced fumble early really helped them settle in a little bit on, early on in the game. And to go back to your special teams point, Ohio State hadn't blocked a punt since 2022, and then they blocked a punt last week. And then they block a punt this week as well. So 2 weeks in a row, the special teams has gotten the job done. I think that unit deserves a shout out, especially for how poorly the special teams played earlier in the year. I'm sure Parker Fleming was somewhere smiling about that, knowing that it wasn't just his fault. But I really think the special teams deserves a shout out for that. And you touched on the fact about Will Howard's deep ball and Will Howard's accuracy overall in this game. I mean, Howard was 15 of 24 for 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. And I thought he had some of the best passes he's had all year. He had one specific throw over the seam to G. Scott that I thought was a throw that I'm not so sure Kyle McCord could have made. last year when he was on the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was locked in all game long. He had a few throws on third down to Jeremiah, that 68-yarder. That was a 3rd and 5. Northwestern was about to the defender almost deflected that pass away, rifled it in there. He takes it, 68 yards. You mentioned it, even the throw that they eventually overturned that touchdown. That was a great throw. And I thought both throws, specifically both throws to Carnell Tate, the 3rd down one close to the goal line, and then the one where he dove into the end zone. I thought those were also good throws. So Howard, I thought this might have been his best game overall as a Buckeye.
Yeah, and by the way, I just want to say shout out to Jackson. I'm sure Ryan feels the same way. Glad that we joined the Voice of College Football. Great opportunity. I'm just happy to be here, man. This is honestly just fun for me. I'm sure it is for Ryan. And
yeah,
but I would tend to agree with you. I would say it would either be this, and I know like some people hate the way the game ended, but either this or the Oregon game.
Yeah, it would have been nice if the offense could have punched something in there in the 4th quarter. And Day even mentioned that in his post-game interview. That's definitely something that's gonna annoy him coming into this week and this week of practice. But what did you think of the offensive line? Kind of after the revamp that they had in Penn State and last week at Purdue. This is kind of the 3rd game they've played together with that new combination. So how would you assess their play overall?
Over the past 3 weeks, and I'm kind of grading this on a scale because of the expectations. I will give them an A right now. At least I'll give them an A in the run game, and like a B in the pass protection. Over the last 3 weeks, I think the run game has been outstanding. Over 170 yards in the 2 games prior to before Northwestern. I'm sorry, no, with Northwestern. I think
173 against Northwestern, 5.2 yards to carry. That's pretty solid.
It is. I mean, last week Travion had 14 per. I mean, it's I think that what Ryan Day is doing is that he's leaning on him just having bigger guys. I think that's what he's doing right now. Donovan, he struggled at times at left tackle, but overall he's played pretty well. He has played pretty well at that position. I think Carson Hensman has definitely been the biggest surprise at left guard, even though he shouldn't be, I guess. But
I didn't really think there was any reason why he should have been demoted at the beginning of the season to begin with. I thought, last year he definitely had his ups and downs as a center, but he was also a freshman. But I thought coming into this year, adding Seth McLaughlin to be the starting center, I thought it would have made sense to put Hinsman at one of the guard spots, specifically right guard instead of Tiger Shabola. Obviously, that's not what they ended up doing, but I think Hinsman's done a really good job at guard. He came out of high school as a guard. I think he's played really well, and that has definitely helped solidify the left side, knowing that if Travion or Quinshon Judkins needs to chip someone on the left side to help Donovan Jackson in pass protection, they know they don't necessarily have to worry about Hinsman as much because he's been pretty solid. And I think that adding him to the mix on the offensive line, I think that's kind of been the key that's unlocked how this run game has really played in the last 3 or so weeks.
No, exactly. I mean, I think this is the best our run game has looked since 2019.
Run game's been very good, yeah.
And so I think over the past few years, they've seen success, but not to where we can wear a team down. Like we look back to 2019, I'm sorry, even 2020, when they chooses to run the ball, and you gotta force him to do it. You gotta force him to do it. But when he does and he leans into it, we look really good doing it. And so it made me really happy to see that for a second week in a row. Coming out of the Nebraska win, where we didn't look good at all. So
yeah, well, the Nebraska game kind of Ohio State fans kind of hit the panic button. I mean, me included. So you're right. It is good to see the offensive line show out a little bit there. And also, I want to shout out Carnell Tate coming back home to Chicago.
Man. Yeah.
First time coming back. This is a guy I think that gets overlooked on this offense because they've got so many weapons. I mean, JJ's already the best player on the team. Emeka Egbuka is the senior leader. He's going to do his thing. But I think Tate could probably be the number one wide receiver on 90% of the other schools out there. Certainly almost every other team in the Big Ten. He's a solid kid. He doesn't complain when he doesn't get his touches either. And when he got his opportunities in this game, he was great. I mean, 2 touchdowns on 4 catches, 52 yards. I thought he played outstanding. And also his blocking's been great too on run plays. Ohio State wide receivers block, and he was especially solid in that area too.
No, I mean, shout out to him, man. I'm sure that was, I'm not sure of, I'm pretty sure it was very big for him to get those touchdowns and play so well in his hometown. And I'm in lockstep with you. If Carnell Tate was at most other big time D1 schools, he is their wide receiver 1. Yeah. He runs good routes. There's nowhere on the field as a wide receiver that he can't play. He can play the X, he can play the Y, he can play the Z, he can go in, he can go out. He's just really good at that. And on top of that, he is the best blocking wide receiver at Ohio State right now.
His blocking has been outstanding, and that's a key part of this run game too. I know we talked about the offensive line, but when they get outside, Henderson Trevon, he likes to cut outside a little bit more than Quinshon does, but no matter what running back is out there and they're going to the outside, when the receivers are able to seal the edge, block off a corner or a safety out there, or even sometimes a linebacker when they're coming back on to crack back, it's good to know that Tate and the other guys can seal off the edge and allow them to score. What did you think about the defense in general?
Real quick, what's going on, Darren? Good guy right there. I'll be on his show on Thursday, so looking forward to that. But yes, Darren, they did. No, I'm sorry, Ryan. What was your question again?
Well, the defense. We talked about the slow start there in the first half, but I really, obviously Ohio State scored 31 unanswered. They kind of slow the Wildcats down there. What did you think about their grade overall, stopping the run and in the pass game?
I thought they did what they were supposed to do. They bend. They didn't break. They forced turnovers. Jack Sawyer, look at his stat line. And I don't mean to just harp on this guy and be negative, because I love Jack Sawyer. I love 33. He had 7 tackles. He had 2 tackles for loss. He whipped on maybe 3 or 4 sacks. And on 2 of them, thankfully, Sonny was there to clean up and get them.
It seems like it seems like our outside guys in general sometimes have issues coming in and making those tackles, because he wasn't the only one, and he hasn't been the only one in the past. I've seen CJ Hicks has a big issue with that. Mitchell Melton has had some issues. JT Tuimalau has had problems. So I don't know if it's a lack of discipline. I don't know if it's a lack of fundamental tackling, but sometimes those guys, they're just not able to crash in and really get either a running back or when a quarterback's trying to escape the pocket. And that's part of the reason why the sack numbers haven't been as high. But, like you mentioned before, he did get that fumble to begin with. I think the defense made the plays when they needed to. I certainly wouldn't give them an A for this game. I'm not sure you would either. But there's something to be said when you shut them out in the second half, knowing what you have ahead of you in the next couple of weeks with the kind of opponents you're going to see at home. So I do worry about the secondary a bit. If Jack Lausch is going to throw for over 200 yards, have chunk plays against Ohio State, I'm worried about what Curtis Rourke's going to do this weekend. The corners have had some problems all year long. Iggy gets way too handsy. He plays
corner like a linebacker.
Yeah. And we knew when he transferred in from Ole Miss that he was a physical guy. That's a type of guy Jim Knowles wanted on his defense. But I think he needs to scale it back just a bit because he gets way too handsy. He gets called for big penalties because of that. And Denzel Burke, I'm not quite sure what's happened this year, but it hasn't been great. That being said, these guys can make plays when their backs are against the wall. So I don't think it's anything to panic about, but I would definitely not say this was their best performance.
No, well, let me go back to what you're saying about the defensive end and the edges. I think that, and this was probably CJ Hicks' best game. He played more on a jack position, outside linebacker, got the rush in there a few times. I thought he did pretty well there. But I think one of the biggest reasons why our defensive ends are unable to get to the corner, to the quarterback, they are very big guys. Now, look back at guys like Chase Young. Chase Young is a generational type of talent. He's a freak athlete. Whereas, I mean, you look at Jack Sawyer, you look at JT. They're both 6'3", 6'4", 270, 265, around that area. If you watch guys around college football, I mean, look at Stewart down in South Carolina.
Yeah, Dylan Stewart.
Now, he comes off the edge. But he's lighter, maybe around 225, 230, bends easier. I think that just in terms of just like football, in the game of football, in the run game, it helps us out. We're the number one rush defense in the country. I think it helps that we have big men in the middle and big men on the outside. But when it comes to our pass rush, it's really hard for us to get down back there. It's really hard for us to take those pursuit angles, those finesse moves, and all that type of stuff, because that's not them. They are just very strong, big guys. They don't have like the Bosa brothers. They don't have the technique of those guys. They're both really good edge players, but they don't have that.
To your point about them being bigger, I think that's more of a strength and conditioning issue. I've got my thoughts on Nick, how he runs that program, but I think that's part of it as well.
And then just with the secondary, I guess I'm to the point when it comes with the Igbinosun, I'm willing to take the penalties, knowing that he's gonna make some other big plays. I'm willing to go through that. You think about the interception at Penn State, people forget the play before that he got beat deep.
Yep.
So Igbinosun give it and he take it away.
Like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, especially at corner. And so and then when it comes to Burke, it's so weird because if you remember his freshman year, he played outstanding.
Yes.
Sophomore year, horrible. Last year, great. I thought I was like, dude, like he could have left.
His sophomore year, he dealt with some injuries too that kind of slowed him down, but it doesn't totally excuse it away. But that was a part of it. And last year he was fantastic. And
then we come into this year, and for all intents and purposes, he was playing good all year until the Oregon game. And what's so eye-popping about that Oregon game, I bring up to a lot of people, the rest of that secondary gave up 162 yards. He gave up 8 for 8 179 yards. And that's an amazing stat. And I don't mean that in a good way, at all.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to Indiana, and if you want, we can go into it now if you would like to.
Yeah, just one more thing here to kind of wrap up the Northwestern talk.
Go ahead.
I think that this is the kind of game that Ohio State needed coming into the Indiana game, a game where they weren't going to come out and dominate and just know, hey, this is going to be a little bit of a dogfight early on, because Indiana certainly is not going to be that way early on. Again, coming off of a bye week. So, Day's obviously not going to be pleased with how the fourth quarter finished offensively or how the game started in the first quarter, but those middle two quarters were solid. And I think something like that is worth carrying over into this week of practice and into this weekend's game against a good Indiana team that's, we can get into it now, talk about, who they've played so far, but I still think this Indiana team's pretty solid. So, I think I think this was a good game for them to have coming in, into this game. So, how do you see this game, Garrison? Like, what do you think Ohio State should worry about, or what do you think they're going to excel in with the Hoosiers coming into town?
All right, so my worries are our offensive line going against their defensive line. We talked earlier about the production that the run game has been able to produce for the last 2 weeks, 340 yards plus. But we're now about to play the second-ranked rush defense in the nation right behind us. Last week.
I also – go ahead, sorry.
No, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, I think it's also important to note, let's go ahead and just acknowledge the elephant in the room right now. Indiana's schedule, their strength of schedule so far has been very poor. Yep. They have played one team so far, that as of right now has a record over 500, and that's Washington, and they're 6-5. So a lot of those numbers, some people can say, are inflated because of the quality of competition that they've played so far, both offensively and defensively. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that's the only reason why they have good numbers. I think IU's a good team. I really do think they are a good team. So those defensive numbers, I think there's something there, but I do think it's worth noting who they've played so far. So that's all I wanted to say. Go ahead.
No, so you're going to learn something about me here. I'm one who does not care for the who played argument. And my reason for it being is that, especially for Indiana, like just sticking to Indiana here, on a normal season, Indiana will probably lose 5 to 6 of these games. But these games are even close. They are manhandling. They are manhandling everybody.
I agree with you. I'm not saying Indiana's a bad team.
Yeah,
they're undefeated for a reason. You can only play who's in front of you.
Exactly.
So yeah, go ahead.
But so like my worries are like offensive line versus their defensive line. That's like, is our offensive line real? Is what we've seen in the last 2 weeks real, or is it a mirage? Another worry of mine, getting to the quarterback. I think that we're going to stop their run game. And if I was being completely honest with you, I think we're probably going to roll them. I really do. But at the same time, that doesn't take away from the fact that Indiana does have players. They brought in guys from the transfer portal that weren't just high-end recruits, but they are all guys that produced at the programs they were located at. They have a really good quarterback, a coach of the year in my estimation.
I think
what I did. I'm gonna make this last one.
Okay.
What I did do though is that I base every thought I have right now of Indiana. I base it off of the Michigan game, and it's not because the Wolverines are some high-end team. They suck. Mm-hmm. They suck. Mm-hmm. But that was the most talented team that they played all season. It's more so on defense. So what I was doing is that I took whatever I saw Michigan do on defense and what IU did on offense, and I said, okay, now, like in my brain, what do I think Ohio State is going to do?
Sure. So I want to. So Steve here has an interesting comment, about James Madison, Hoosiers simply don't have enough depth. So to that point, obviously, Kurt Cignetti brought a lot of his JMU guys over.
Yep.
I want to say it was like 17 guys that he brought over. And even though they are from a lower, I don't want to say class of conference, but they are lower. Okay, James Madison doesn't exactly play the highest level of competition in college football.
Right.
They just don't. So, but at the same time, they're still playing D1 ball, and these kids have also played a lot of football. IU has a lot of fifth and even sixth-year seniors out there on the field. That experience counts for something.
It does.
So even if they don't have the top-end talent that Ohio State has, I think that experience and, with 17 guys coming over, they've got a lot of chemistry too. So I think that experience can really help them in a hostile environment like this. Make no mistake about it, this is by far the hardest game IU's had to play this year. It's by far the toughest environment that they've had to play in this season. But I don't necessarily think that they're going to be shell-shocked as soon as they step out on that field.
No, I real quick, I agree with you. I completely agree. I wrote something down here. IU, like when they're away, in the first quarter, they only give up 3.3 points per game.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they give them on defense. And I mean,
and that's a concern with Ohio State. I mean, we just saw them go scoreless against Northwestern, and Northwestern's a much worse opponent.
Mm-hmm.
I do think this game, I do think this game is going to be a tough one early. Part of the reason for that is the fact that IU's coming off a bye week. They were able to rest up a bit, really study some film, and get a game plan for how they want to attack the Buckeyes. And part of what they're probably going to do, they saw Northwestern do. They want to keep the ball away from the Buckeyes offense. They want to have a high time of possession, and they want to keep it away. Now, IU is also a very high-scoring offense when they want to be. They put up a lot of points. They put up, I think it's about 42 points a game.
They know they can put it on you, they will.
Exactly. So with Ohio State, coming off, I wouldn't say an easy game against Northwestern, and with how they've had the notorious issue of starting slow, I think this is going to be a game in the first half. I would not be surprised to see a tie ball game going into halftime, going into the locker room. Now, the second half is where things, I think, change. I think Ohio State, the depth of talent they have is just far greater than anything that IU has. And, this comment here, they're going to try to pass all over us. They definitely are. Curtis Rourke, again, I know I talked about their lack of competition that they face so far. Curtis Rourke is no joke. He has been an efficient passer. He is someone that, again, has a lot of experience out there. He's one of those JMU transfers. And I don't think he's going to be intimidated going to play the shoe, playing in the shoe in front of a raucous crowd. I mean, he's got 21 interceptions. He's got 21 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions. That's on par with what Will Howard's doing. So if Ohio State is going to win this game, they're going to need to play a lot better in the secondary than what we've seen. And they're going to need to be able to get some pressure on the quarterback. Now, they don't necessarily have to garner a lot of sacks, but they've got to get some pressure in Rourke's face, make some of those throws a little bit harder, and really make those windows tight for him, because he'll carve you up all day if he's got, a 2-3 yard cushion between his receivers and the next closest defender.
Ryan, I'm looking at it right now, man. I mean, Elijah Tarrant, 18 yards, average 18 yards per catch. Amar Cooper Jr., 22. That's like, and if you read that as a Buckeye fan, knowing what we've seen on the deep passes this year defensively, that's gonna put some fear in you if we don't get to quarterback. It's going to.
Yeah, this Indiana team, I don't think is someone. I don't think it's a team that you can take lightly, and I don't think Ohio State is. I mean, they're ranked 5th. They have for a reason. They haven't lost a game yet. And by the way, I misspoke earlier. Curtis Rourke is from the University of Ohio. He's not one of those JMU transfers. But again, I think his experience and the overriding experience that this team has specifically on offense, I think is going to give Ohio State some issues. Now, I know I mentioned I think it's going to be a tie ball game going into halftime, or I wouldn't be surprised to see it be a tie ball game at halftime. I do think by the end of the game it ends up being a double-digit victory for Ohio State, just simply because of that overriding talent. I think
Yeah.
the run game specifically, I do think Ohio State will wear down the Hoosiers up front. The environment, I think, will start to get a little bit juiced up, especially if there are some anxious fans in the stands, if it's a close game at halftime. I don't see this Indiana team quite being ready for the big stage of knocking off a top 2 Ohio State team on the road. Now, I still think IU would probably make the playoff if they, lose by, 10 or fewer points to Ohio State. We can talk about that a little bit later, but
Yeah.
I still think that this is a victory that Ohio State should have. What do you think?
I tend to agree with you. I think the game will be closer. I would say.
Oh, we may have lost Garrison there. I think he froze there a little bit. But,
can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you now, Garrison. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. No, I tend to agree with you in thinking that most of the first half is going to be close, and that's without taking away any turnovers, stupid penalties or things like that. But I agree that in the second half, I think this game gets not out of hand, but it gets blown apart simply because of depth, just as you said. Like I said, I took a lot of things away from that game last week that they played against the team in Ann Arbor. And what I mostly saw was that, their offensive depth isn't as good as Michigan's defensive depth. I think that it's going to be the same for this. And the only thing was they couldn't score on Indiana. That's not the same case for Ohio State.
Yeah, Michigan's offense is really, really bad.
It's god-awful. I told you about the first quarter stats, but then I also looked at the third quarter because I think that's the most important quarter of the game. So Ohio State averages 12.1 points per game in the third quarter. Indiana's at 8.7. But they also give up 4.1 while Ohio State gives up 0.9 on the third quarter. I think when that happens, especially if Ohio State defers to start the game, I think that's exactly where the game gets out of hand.
Yeah.
I think that if Indiana sees themselves go down by, let's say, 2 scores, and if Ohio State's hitting on all cylinders, I think at that point they have to know that they're either not going to be able to get back in this game, or they're going to press. I think that's what's more likely going to happen. None of these guys have been in a big game this year. Not one player on Indiana. Ohio State's been to Oregon. They went to Penn State. They've already been to the 2 toughest places to play in the Big Ten, without question.
And you didn't misspeak there. 2 of the toughest places to play in the country.
Yeah. I stand by that. So it's I think Warwick is good enough to keep them to make them competitive throughout the whole game. Because I do believe you can be down by 3 touchdowns and still be somewhat competitive. I do believe that.
Well, and especially with the secondary that Ohio State has thrown out there, as we talked earlier with the Northwestern recap, some of the corners didn't play particularly well. But Steve here seems to think that Will Howard played his best game of the year. So I do want to talk about Will Howard a little bit and what he has been able to do this year. You know, his numbers right now through these first 9 games, he's got 2,484 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's completing 73% of his passes. He has been lights out for Ohio State. And I think, as we can all agree, he has been an upgrade over Kyle McCord from what the Buckeyes had last year.
Without question. Without question.
Yeah. And so, we are getting towards the end of the year, and the Heisman conversation has started to heat up a little bit. What do you think the conversation should be around Will Howard in terms of the Heisman?
In terms of the Heisman, I think this is the way I see it. If Dylan Gabriel is going to be up there, then he should be up there too. Now, I'm not saying that he should be ahead of guys like Travis Hunter, or guys like Ashton Jeanty. I looked at the odds earlier. I'm not sure why Cam Ward's odds just dropped like that.
I can tell you why. Because because Miami lost a game and they should have lost 3 others. And Cam Ward is either incredible or a turnover machine.
Well, maybe so. But without them, that's a 5-win team to me. I think Miami is in the same situation that Ohio State was in 2021, where you have a terrible defense, a really talented offense, and your quarterback is making you win games. I think that's exactly what's happening there. But when we talk about Will Howard, I guess you can't really call the Penn State game a Heisman moment because he had the pick 6 and the fumble.
Yeah.
But I do believe this is a chance, this Indiana game, for him to have a Heisman moment. Now, a lot of people are gonna. I think Ohio State's always in this type of situation like they are with Penn State, where I think that if we win this game, no one's gonna give Ohio State their fair credit for it because they're gonna see the name on the behind the number.
Sure.
But I think that if he goes out there, balls out, and when I say ball out, I need 300 out of Will. I need 4 total touchdowns. I need no fumbles, no interceptions.
Yep.
And you need to hit, and he needs to hit around what he's been all season, around 70% or higher, which is actually insane. Like I think that I thought he could hit around 65 this year. A lot of people coming to the season that wanted to hate on Will Howard. They said, oh, well, he threw 60, 59% at Kansas State. But I'm like, okay, well, now he has Ohio State talent. He has Ryan Day coaching, Chip Kelly coaching. I didn't see how people could understand why he would play better, but never in my wildest dreams I think that he would reach 70% completion percentage.
Yeah, well, and he's got Ohio State talent in terms of wide receivers. He's never played with a group of guys outside that will make his job as easy as it's been. And just to give you comparison, Howard's completing 73% of his passes. Last year, McCord, he completed 66% of his passes.
Exactly.
So.
And to bring up those passes you talked about, Kyle McCord isn't making those passes.
No.
And a lot of plays that would be sacks, Will Howard gets out of. That's huge.
Yeah, and I agree with the point that you made as far as the numbers that Howard needs to put up. I do think he needs to ball out in these last 3 games to be – and look, I'm not here to make an argument that Will Howard is going to win the Heisman. I don't think he should. Travis Hunter, I think, is the best player in college football. What he's doing on both sides of the ball is pretty crazy. And Ashton Jeanty, the numbers he's putting up as a running back, pretty insane as well. But I do think Howard's got an argument to at least be invited to New York, to at least be a finalist, and really have, be another Ohio State Heisman finalist.
Yeah, and just to point this out, Curtis Warwick has better Heisman odds than Will Howard.
Yeah, that's insane. That's crazy.
I don't get it.
For Howard they're ludicrous. But again, I think it's because a lot of people in the national media, Ohio State's got a great running game. Judkins and Henderson are carrying the team. Oh, it's Jeremiah Smith who's putting up those numbers. When he's got 3 first-round wide receivers, it's not that hard to put these kind of numbers up. But you also look, Kyle McCord had the number 4 overall pick last year he was throwing with too, and he didn't put up these kind of numbers. So
no,
I think if Howard plays,
Emeka was hurt a lot last year. I will give him that.
Sure.
But still,
if Howard is able to play the way he's able, what he's shown so far, I see there's no reason why he can't go to New York.
Yeah, because Heisman voting. They put their votes in.
It's before so it's
before conference championship.
A lot of the people do it before the conference championship game, but some of them wait until then. Which, quite frankly, if you're a Heisman voter, you should wait till the very last second. You should get all the possible data points you can get.
And thanks, Mark, for the comment. Love to see it, man. Love to see it.
Yeah. So again, I'm not arguing Howard should be the winner of the Heisman. But
neither of us are.
But if he plays as well as he, as we think he can, I think he's got an opportunity to get, really get it, to New York. So is there anything else you kind of wanted to wrap up in terms of this, Will Howard or IU or anything like that?
Yeah, I actually have a question for you.
Sure.
For us to win this game, who do you think has to be the most important player on defense and offense?
Defensively for Ohio State, I think it needs to start up front. So Tyleik Williams. Tyleik Williams is the best defensive lineman that Ohio State has. He's been the most consistent guy. And if he can get some pressure up front and make Rourke move about in the pocket, that throws him off kilter just enough, or maybe he gets flustered in the loud environment that is the shoe. As we talked about, he's never played in an environment like this, a stadium as big as this, stadium as loud as this. So if Ohio State can get pressure up front and really push the pocket on him, I think it's going to make things harder for him. And also, if Tyleik can get some pressure up front in the running game, I think that helps a lot, because if Ohio State stops the run and makes IU a one-dimensional team, that is going to make things a lot harder on their part in order to win. Because then Ohio State, they can start getting, and they have started in recent weeks, getting a little bit more exotic with their blitzes. Seems like we lost Garrison here for a second. But to continue my point, Ohio State has started bringing in Sonny Styles on some blitzes, started bringing in Cody Simon on the edge a few times. So if they continue to bring these guys on the outside with that push from the front four, I think IU is going to have a heck of a time moving the ball with consistency and being able to score points when they have, when they're a one-dimensional football team. So that's kind of my take on who I think needs to play best on the defensive side of the ball. And, if Tyleik Williams has as good of a game as we think, Garrison's back.
I was good. I was picking the banner. My fingers, I have a Mac, and they swooped up the whole thing.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
All good. But as I was finishing up, just saying, I think he needs to be the guy that, really kind of shows up on the defensive side of the ball. But, I really kind of wanted to shift over to stuff that's been happening around the program, not necessarily on the field, and really talk about what's happening here with some of the recruiting class stuff that's been going on. So for those of you that may not know, in recent days, so over the weekend, actually just hours after the Northwestern game, Ohio State was able to pick up a 3-star wide receiver recruit. He's actually a local kid from Pataskala, Jaden Ricketts. He's someone that I think Ohio State sees a lot of promise in, and they really like his upside. And if there's one person on the staff that I trust to evaluate talent, it's Brian Hartline.
Yes.
So I don't think there's a whole lot to be worried about, even with the fact that he's just a 3-star recruit right now. And he's actually for the 2026 recruiting class. So what are your thoughts on Ricketts?
So I actually watched his film as soon as I saw that he committed, because I was like, who is this kid? Saw he was the class of 2026. And the first thing in my mind was, just as what you said, well, if Hartline's picking him, then I trust it. I have no reason not to. So I watched him. I thought he has great body control. That was the first thing I noticed, especially at a young age. I think that for kids at that age to know how to maneuver their body while it's in the air, that's a very hard thing to do, especially combining the hand-eye coordination, knowing how to land. I thought he was very good at that. I'm excited. It's really good to see that Brian Hartline doesn't need to just go after the 5-star kids.
Yeah, we know he can land those kids. I mean, he does it almost every year.
Yeah, exactly. And
in that same 2026 class, got Chris Henry Jr. So
yeah, I can't wait to see him on the see him on the field. But I see that. And I think it's been almost like a tendency of his lately.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Mark.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that was a great comment. Actually, I was happy I read that. But I mean, you look at him. You also look at guys like Bachman. You look at guys like I mean, shoot, I'm blanking on his name right now. Boggs. When but he wasn't even though he's decommitted from us. Lower rated kid. So it's really cool to see that Brian Hartline is doing that, especially getting the kids in Ohio. I'm in a lot of Twitter spaces, and what's really big to a lot of Buckeye fans is that we get kids out of Ohio.
Build that sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree with that. I mean, you look at the Jim Tressel area, he made sure that he did that. Urban Meyer did the same. He dig into the south a little bit more than Tressel did, but he still had that continuity with the Ohio, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, all those areas, going to some areas where some coaches wouldn't go to. You got to do that. You got to find those type of athletes, find those type of players, especially kids that grow up loving this program. I think getting guys like Will Smith Jr. I think that I like that. I like getting guys like how am I blanking on his name right now? But you get the point.
Yeah, the overall arching point is Ryan Day and his staff, and specifically Heartline here, most recently has made it a point to make sure that the best kids in the state of Ohio stay in Ohio.
Exactly.
And, I think the biggest example of that is in the 2025 class, Tavian St. Clair. He's a local kid, Bell Fountain, number 2 overall recruit in the country, plays at a small school, but has just killed it at every 7-on-7 camp, every single camp that he's gone to. So is the talent he's got working around him isn't really that good. And he's really, he elevated the talent as best as he could in the last couple of years. So, building that fence around Ohio, making sure you get the best kids, I think is important. Now,
exactly.
Even though, Ricketts was the positive part of the recruiting news that happened, in the last couple of days, but unfortunately there has been some bad news on the recruiting front too. It was also reported on Sunday that Tarvos Arnold, linebacker, 4-star kid, he was actually, Tarvos Alford, he was going to decommit and flip to Miami. Now he is a Florida kid, so this isn't entirely out of left field, but at the same time, you would like to keep talented kids who are committed to you. And he's been committed to the program since February, so it's not
for a while.
It's not like this is a recruit who just committed in July and all of a sudden had a change of heart. But what are your thoughts on the Buckeyes losing Alford?
I think that a South Florida kid moving his commitment is part of course. I think that's a norm for that area, for the players that come out of the area. And it's not an indictment on them. It's just how it goes, and it's understandable because Alford's a really good athlete, really good linebacker. Number 9 linebacker in the nation on composite. So
if they have to lose someone from this class, again, like I said, you never, in an ideal world, you don't lose anybody who's already committed to your class. But if you're going to lose someone, the linebacker spot isn't a horrible place for them to lose someone just because they've got Bogpen coming in. They've got into the 5-star linebacker coming in. And with Jim Knowles' system,
Petty John Lee. Yeah,
exactly. They only play 2 linebackers at a time. So you don't have to have that position built up with as much depth as you do on the defensive line or the secondary or the wide receiver spot. So if this is going to happen, at the linebacker spot, it's not the end of the world.
No, it's not. And the linebacker, I think the linebacker room right now has a lot of depth. You would like to see them play better on the field, but I mean, you got Reese, you got Powers. I think that, and you have these guys coming in. I think there's a lot of talent in that room that could be progressed, and so Alfred leaving is not the end of the world, as you said. It's I like it. Like when I saw it, it sucked. It sucked, but I'm not upset. I mean, I was more upset about the news today.
Yeah, and let's get to that news. Yeah, Zahira Mathis, he announced on his X account that he was decommitting from Ohio State. He did mention that they were still a top school for him, but let's be honest, how many kids decommit and then end up recommitting to that same school? So
not many.
Yeah, so more than likely he's gone, and he's an edge guy. So this one hurts a little bit more, and he's a big dude. He's 6'6", 260. He's a guy that they were probably going to put, as a defensive end, someone who they thought could rush the passer.
Yep.
He's a four-star recruit. So this one hurts a little bit, especially because in recent years, Larry Johnson hasn't quite built the depth at defensive end, that high level pass rush type of guy. So this one stings.
No, it does. I think that after taking away quarterback, after offensive lineman, defensive end is probably the biggest position in football right now, especially in college football, with quarterbacks being a little bit more athletic than they are in the NFL, or at least you see them more often.
Yeah.
Larry's had his years. He's had some good. I think last year was a good class for him. This year is kind of you still got his eye on Grady. You still got him, and if I'm being honest, that makes me a little bit more happy knowing that he's more like a 225 guy, a little bit more bendy, longer, athletic.
Wait until he gets in mixed program.
Yeah,
right up.
Yeah, it turns into a D tackle.
Yeah,
but no, listen, I think the Mathis recruitment, as you said, once a kid decommits, it's all but over. I think that it would be a pipe dream to think that we would be getting him back. But what I did see earlier on Twitter today is that someone commented on there. He said there's a reason for this. Someone else is coming. So if that's the case, then I'll take it. But if not, this one hurts.
There have been some rumors, and for those that don't know, Jakeem Stewart is still out there, and the rumor is the reason Zahir decided to decommit is because Stewart's coming in. He's the big fish left in this class.
Yeah.
He's a 5-star kid, defensive end, and Ohio State's competing against the best of the best for him. He's actually at the Oregon game, visiting Oregon while Ohio State was there.
Yeah.
So he's made an official visit to Ohio State as well, and I this week and the Michigan week. The Michigan week is going to be the biggest weekend for the recruiting, for finishing this recruiting class, firming everyone up, and making sure that they can keep this class together, and maybe even adding a Jakeem Stewart, because Mathis and Alford, them leaving, they're not the only guys that Ohio State's going to have to worry about leaving. If the Buckeyes end up losing Naima Ford, who is a 5-star corner, again, one of the cornerstones of this recruiting class. It's one of the first kids that they got earlier here in the spring. And he's been taking official visits everywhere. Of course, on Twitter or X, he's come out and said, hey, I'm a Buckeye, I'm locked in, but his actions keep saying differently. And now he's been trending to Auburn, or now there's rumbles about him going to Oregon, which would really sting. So they've got some work to do to kind of finish up this class.
No, they do. And
to answer your question here, Steve, I think he'd be coming for Ohio State. LJ he's 70 years old. He's on his way out in terms of his coaching career. Anybody who commits to Ohio State at this point on the defensive line, I think is committing to Ohio State, and maybe even Jim Knowles as opposed to Larry Johnson. What do you think, Harrison?
I think most of the guys that come, they commit for LJ. I think that he really connects with guys.
At this point?
Yeah. I think I would put Lachlan in the same category. I think guys really respect him. They get into a room with him and they love talking to him. It's kind of talks like an uncle to you. I think that some guys just carry that respect with them, and a lot of young guys gravitate towards it. Now, yes, Ohio State has something to do with it. Like, I won't get that twisted, but I think that even though in the fan perception, LJ might be falling off a little bit, to these kids, he's still the same guy that they've always heard about.
Sure.
I think so. And the thing is, we as fans, we can all sit here and talk about the lack of production we see out of Jack Sawyer and Tuimoloau. Guess what? They're both going the top 2 or 3 rounds. They're both going to get drafted. And no, go ahead. What are you going to say?
I think some of the frustration that comes from Ohio State fans is the fact that they haven't had the big first round, guy in a while. There hasn't been a Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Chase Young. None of those guys. And JT and Jack Sawyer came in as 5-star kids. People expected him to be the next Chase Young.
I think they're both they're both top 5 recruits in the nation.
Yeah. I think JT was the top. He was the top overall recruit. I think Jack Sawyer was number 3 in the composite, and I think ESPN had Jack Sawyer number 1. So again, I think those expectations have kind of led Buckeye fans to wonder if LJ still has his fastball. Now, I do think part of it is Jim Knowles' system, and those two, I think there were some, let's just call it some disagreements between the two here earlier in the season. And I think after the Oregon game, that finally got settled. But, you disagreed with me in terms of who I think defensive lineman would come to commit for, whether him or the program. I think it's more of Ohio State in general and what they can do. But that's okay.
No, that's understandable. The brand is the brand.
Yeah, and that brand will be on full force here on Saturday, against IU. They're going to, they're going to need everything that they have for that game. So, do you have anything else you want to talk about here before we wrap up?
No, I did want to bring up Bogpin Miller. I did want to talk about him. So, from what I've heard, he's been balling out because he plays quarterback, and he's been balling out. I've heard he has some really good zip on the ball that in the playoffs when he was playing. But I mean, he got moved from 247 from 682 to 220. Now, for a lot of people outside the fan base, they might just call it a Buckeye bump as a wide receiver, and that's fine. But what do you think about him as a prospect at Ohio State?
So his size, honestly, with his length and his body frame, he reminds me a little bit of Benjamin Victor. Victor was a guy who was taller. He was a little bit wiry, didn't really fill out as much, but that's just kind of the build. Now, hopefully Miller is a little bit more productive than what Victor was. Victor really had that one good, big play against Penn State, and that was kind of it. But I think with who they're surrounding him with in that room, I think they need a guy who has the size that he has, that can be a threat in the red zone, that can be a threat to kind of catch a jump ball, and really just be someone that they can, someone that knows how those guys play. And Miller, obviously he's not coming into, he's got that quarterback background, but he's not coming in to play quarterback. But his knowledge of how quarterbacks think, I think that'll help give him a little bit of an edge in terms of executing the routes, blocking out there in the run game, and things of that nature. Do I ever see him being a number 1 for Ohio State? No. I could see him being a solid contributor, along the lines of maybe even like a Johnny Dixon, some guy who was solid, who never really, popped off the screen in terms of
made some big plays.
Exactly, but a guy who can make big plays. So, I think he's still got a bright future.
Yeah, and Steve, Jim Knowles runs the defense, period, point blank. I agree with that. And Well, I was talking to my co-host Bryce on Scar and Blue Show, and I told him, I said, eventually, man, like is LJ not your subordinate? Is he not your subordinate? And in that case, I mean, it is on Jim Knowles. But there is one head there's one person that falls onto the end of the day,
and that's Ryan Day. Yep.
And man, listen, I was in the Navy for 8 years, man. And in my mind, if someone's your subordinate, man, you don't have to, not disrespectfully, but you better treat him as such. Like I have nightmares from last year's game against Notre Dame when I saw that JT and Jack played every single snap.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to, this year I saw what Tyleek, I forgot what game it was. Tyleek had 68 snaps, and I'm sitting here wondering why is this fat behind on the field for 68 snaps? So it's
well, and that's part of building that depth, and now they don't really have that depth back there, so they don't rotate as many guys. So we'll have to talk about Silva there. So if there's nothing else, you've got I move here to wrap up. Great first show here with you, Garrison.
Man.
Thank you all for everybody for tuning in. We will be back on Thursday, same time, 8:00 Eastern. So come check us out.
Yep, call-in show.
I'm sorry?
Call-in show.
Yeah, call-in show. So come in with your comments. We'll be firing away with whatever you guys want to talk about for most of that show. So until then, we'll see you on Saturday. We'll see you on Thursday. All right.
All right, man. OH.
IO.